In the late 1930s, Europe stood on the edge of collapse. Hitler's armies were unstoppable, sweeping across nations with mechanical precision and terrifying speed. But behind every victory, behind every strike and maneuver, there existed an invisible weapon, one that no bomb or bullet could destroy. It was a machine called Enigma. To the Germans, it was perfection, a cipher so complex that even if the Allies captured one, they could never understand its secrets. Each morning, every German radio operator changed the machine's settings: 3 rotors, 26 letters, endless combinations, creating billions of possible outcomes. A single mistake meant the message was lost forever. For the Allies, every transmission they intercepted was a mystery written in an unbreakable language. The messages filled the airwaves like ghosts, carrying orders, coordinates, and plans that could decide the fate of millions, but no one could read them. Entire convoys were destroyed in the Atlantic. U-boats hunted merchant ships with surgical accuracy, guided by encrypted instructions the British couldn't decipher. It seemed hopeless. The war was being fought in the dark. In a desperate attempt to change the tide, the British government gathered a team of scholars, chess champions, linguists, and mathematicians at a secluded estate known as Bletchley Park. Their mission was as simple as it was impossible: to break Enigma and expose the hidden pulse of the Nazi war machine. Among these quiet minds was a young mathematician named Alan Turing, a man as unconventional as he was brilliant. He didn't think like the others. While most tried to understand Enigma as a code, Turing saw it as a system, a machine that could be defeated not by human intuition, but by another machine. He believed logic and mathematics could outthink chaos itself. As bombs fell over London and Europe burned, Turing began to design a device that could test Enigma's endless combinations faster than any person alive. It was the start of a new kind of warfare, one fought with mathematics, electricity, and determination. What no one yet knew was that this quiet, eccentric mathematician was about to change the course of history forever. In a world drowning in secrecy, Alan Turing's mind became the weapon that would help turn the tide of war. When Alan Turing arrived at Bletchley Park in 1939, few people there knew his name, and even fewer understood his mind. He was quiet, awkward, often lost in thought, his tie slightly askew, and his sentences trailing into murmurs of equations. Yet, behind that unassuming exterior lay one of the most brilliant mathematical minds of the 20th century. The estate he entered wasn't a grand laboratory or a military fortress. It was a patchwork of wooden huts, filled with typewriters, teacups, cigarette smoke, and endless rows of paper filled with coded transmissions. The people there, linguists, engineers, and code clerks, were fighting a war not with rifles, but with pencils and logic. Every day, the German military transmitted thousands of encrypted messages, and every night, teams of analysts worked until exhaustion, trying to catch a glimpse of meaning hidden within the chaos. They called it the bombing problem, but to Turing, it was a puzzle, a problem of patterns and machines. He didn't just want to read the messages, he wanted to build something that could think through them faster than any human. His colleagues thought it was madness. The Enigma code changed daily, the combinations were astronomical. Even with 1,000 mathematicians, it could take centuries to try every possibility. But Turing wasn't looking for people, he was looking for logic. He imagined a device that could test each possible rotor setting mechanically, one after another, until the correct alignment revealed the hidden text. It would be part machine, part brain, a new form of intelligence designed for one purpose: to outwit the Nazis' perfect cipher. Despite skepticism from military officials and even his peers, Turing began drafting the design. He called it the Bombe. In a small hut behind closed doors, he sketched circuits and rotors by lamplight, turning abstract mathematics into physical reality. For months, the machine existed only in his imagination and on sheets of paper, covered with cryptic notes and symbols only he could decipher. Yet, even as his strange invention took shape, the war outside grew darker. The Luftwaffe bombed London nightly, German U-boats strangled supply lines, thousands of soldiers and civilians died each week. Britain was running out of time. And so, in the midst of chaos and doubt, Alan Turing pressed on, his mind locked on one idea. Somewhere inside those endless strings of letters lay the key to saving millions of lives. By early 1940, Alan Turing's idea had moved from paper to purpose. Deep inside Hut 8 at Bletchley Park, the sound of gears and soldering irons replaced the quiet scratching of pencils. Engineers, electricians, and mathematicians worked side by side, piecing together Turing's vision, an enormous, humming device unlike anything the world had ever seen. It stood tall, filled with spinning drums, wires, and clicking switches, a machine that could think faster than any man. Turing called it the Bombe, not as a weapon of destruction, but as one of revelation. It was designed to tear through millions of possible Enigma settings, testing combinations at lightning speed until the correct one fell into place. But it wasn't just an engineering marvel, it was a race against death itself. Every day, thousands of encrypted messages poured in from the front lines, from U-boats prowling the Atlantic to panzer divisions advancing across Europe. Each message expired with the dawn, because Enigma settings changed daily. If the bomb failed to find the key by midnight, all progress was lost, and the next day's code began anew. The pressure was immense. In the cold, dimly lit huts, the operators, many of them young women from the Women's Royal Naval Service, fed endless streams of paper into the machine. They listened as the bomb's rotors clattered and clicked, the rhythmic heartbeats of mechanical intelligence searching for meaning. When the machine paused, it might mean success or another dead end. Turing watched in silence, hands folded, mind constantly calculating, refining, adjusting. Failure was constant. Weeks turned into months, and still, the Enigma held strong. Some in the military began to question the project altogether. But Turing refused to quit. Every setback revealed another weakness in Enigma's armor, another pattern to exploit. He tweaked circuits, adjusted logic paths, and worked through nights so long that the dawn became a blur. Slowly, methodically, his creation began to prove itself. The bomb started producing clues, tiny fragments of German messages, words that made sense, coordinates that matched reality. For the first time, the veil began to lift. And as the machine's rotors spun faster, a realization spread through Bletchley Park. They were no longer chasing ghosts. They were beginning to listen to the heartbeats of the enemy, and soon, that knowledge would change everything. It happened quietly, almost without ceremony. One cold morning in January 1941, inside Hut 8, a young operator noticed something strange. The bomb's rotors had stopped, not in failure, but in success. A single sequence of letters had emerged from the mechanical noise. To anyone else, it was gibberish. But to Alan, it was music. The machine had found a match, a valid Enigma setting. Hours later, when the decoded message appeared, it revealed something no one in Britain had ever seen before: real-time orders from the German Navy. Positions of U-boats, schedules, routes. For the first time, the Allies could see through the fog of war. The code that was once considered unbreakable had begun to crack. The news spread through Bletchley Park like wildfire. For the exhausted crypto-analysts who had spent months chasing patterns and chaos, it was like a breath of air after drowning. But for Turing, this was only the beginning. The messages kept coming, thousands of them each day, filled with lives and lies, victories and disasters. Every new breakthrough was a race against the clock, because the Germans constantly improved their encryption, adding new rotors and plugboard settings. It was a deadly chess match, and every move cost lives. Still, the breakthroughs were undeniable. British convoys in the Atlantic began to reroute just hours before U-boat ambushes. Merchant ships that would have vanished beneath the waves now arrived safely in port. The tide of the Battle of the Atlantic began to shift, not because of new ships or weapons, but because of information. Information drawn from the mind of a mathematician and the relentless rhythm of a machine. Turing, however, remained distant from the celebration. While others saw victory, he saw the next challenge. He knew that every day Enigma evolved, and that one mistake, one delay, could mean thousands of dead sailors. His focus was total, his work endless. He redesigned circuits, improved the Bombe's logic, and began dreaming of even more advanced machines. Machines that could not only break codes, but think for themselves. Few realized it at the time, but in that dim hut at Bletchley Park, Alan Turing wasn't just decoding messages. He was building the foundation of the digital age. And as the war raged on, his quiet revolution inside the walls of Bletchley Park would help save nations and forever change the nature of intelligence itself. As the war dragged into its darkest years, Bletchley Park became the beating heart of a new kind of battlefield, one fought not with rifles or tanks, but with silence, secrecy, and intellect. The men and women who worked there called it the War of Shadows. Every intercepted message was a ghost from the front, carrying secrets that could alter the course of history. Each code cracked by Turing's machines revealed the movement of fleets, the plans of generals, the whispers of spies. Yet the irony was cruel. No one outside those walls could ever know. The intelligence Bletchley produced, codenamed Ultra, was classified at the highest level. Only a handful of commanders were allowed to see it. The analysts could never speak of their victories, not even to family. Every message decoded meant a ship saved, a convoy rerouted, an ambush prevented, but it also meant silence. They celebrated in whispers, often in tears, knowing their work would never be acknowledged. Inside Hut 8, the nights grew longer. Cigarette smoke hung in the air like fog. Turing and his team worked in near-constant exhaustion, deciphering messages faster than the enemy could encrypt them. They learned to think like their opponents, predicting how German officers chose their daily settings, searching for human patterns hidden inside mechanical chaos. They discovered the Germans often used predictable phrases, like Heil Hitler or weather reports, to start or end messages. These tiny cracks in Enigma's perfection became the footholds for Turing's logic. It wasn't brute force that broke the code, it was insight into human error. Meanwhile, the world outside Bletchley was crumbling. German forces advanced deep into Russia. Britain endured the Blitz. The U-boats continued to stalk the Atlantic. Each victory at Bletchley felt like a flicker of light in an endless storm. And through it all, Turing remained tireless, almost mechanical in his focus. He rarely rested, rarely spoke, but when he did, his mind raced ahead of everyone around him. He knew that the War of Shadows would not be won by strength or courage, but by patience, intellect, and the relentless pursuit of truth. In a war built on deception, Turing's machines were becoming the eyes that could finally see through the darkness. By 1943, the world had reached a breaking point. The Axis powers dominated vast territories across Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. The Allies were bleeding resources and hope. But deep inside Bletchley Park, the tide was quietly beginning to turn. Turing's machines now worked day and night, decoding thousands of German messages every week. What began as fragments of words had become a flood of intelligence. Orders, troop movements, submarine locations, even Hitler's personal communications. For the first time, the Allies weren't reacting to the enemy, they were anticipating him. Entire battles were won before the first shot was fired. In the Atlantic, convoys sailed safely through corridors of ocean once ruled by U-boats, guided by information that only a handful of people knew existed. In North Africa, Allied commanders used decoded messages to outmaneuver Rommel's forces, turning the tide of a campaign that had seemed unwinnable. The impact of Bletchley's work rippled across the world, invisible but undeniable. And yet, the pressure only grew. Every day, new versions of the Enigma appeared, more rotors, more complexity, more layers of secrecy. Turing responded the only way he knew how, by building better machines. He refined the Bombe, improved its speed, and pushed for even greater automation. The war had become a battle of mathematics versus machinery, human intellect versus mechanical chaos. Turing's mind became the center of the storm. His colleagues often saw him sitting alone at night, staring at patterns of numbers and letters that looked meaningless to others but spoke to him in whispers of logic. He worked with an intensity that frightened some, driven not by ambition but by necessity. He knew that every delay could cost thousands of lives. As Allied success mounted, so did the secrecy. No one could know that Enigma was broken. The illusion had to be maintained at all costs. Sometimes, even when the British knew an attack was coming, they couldn't act because doing so would reveal their secret advantage. It was a burden few could bear, but Turing carried it silently. By the end of 1943, the Allies had seized control of the Atlantic, and a new word began to spread through Bletchley Park, a word that had not been spoken in years: victory. The unbreakable code had been broken, and with it, the myth of German invincibility. Even as Allied forces began to reclaim lost ground in Europe, the true heroes of the war remained invisible. At Bletchley Park, Turing and his colleagues worked tirelessly, yet they could not speak of their triumphs. Each victory came cloaked in secrecy. Convoys that arrived safely in British ports, U-boats sunk before they could strike, battles won before the enemy even knew the fight had begun, none of it could be celebrated publicly. The world would never know the role played by numbers, patterns, and machines in the survival of nations. And so, the men and women of Bletchley lived in silence, their accomplishments measured not in accolades or medals, but in lives saved and enemy plans foiled. For Alan Turing, the burden of secrecy was heavy. He watched as newspapers chronicled battles and naval losses, knowing that the intelligence which had made victory possible could never be mentioned. Even within the halls of Bletchley, only a select few knew the full scope of Ultra, the code name for the decrypted intelligence. Operators, clerks, and assistants carried out their tasks methodically, unaware that their work was changing the course of history. Yet, Turing's genius continued to shine. He refined the Bombe machines, solved new cryptographic challenges, and predicted enemy behaviors with uncanny accuracy. He became the quiet center of a network that spanned the war, connecting mathematics, engineering, and military strategy into a single, invisible weapon. The moral weight of secrecy was immense. Lives depended on silence. A single slip, a casual word to a loved one, could unravel months of painstaking work and cost countless lives. And yet, Turing remained focused, driven not by recognition or fame, but by the understanding that each decoded message meant survival, and each unbroken code represented danger. Outside the walls of Bletchley, the war raged on with all its chaos and carnage. Inside, a silent revolution was underway, one that would ultimately shorten the war, save millions, and prove that intellect could rival armies. By the time the Allies advanced into Germany, the contributions of Bletchley Park remained classified, the brilliance of Turing largely hidden, and the story of the man who cracked the unbreakable code remained a secret, waiting decades to be fully told. Alan Turing was a man of contradictions, brilliant yet introverted, logical yet deeply human, a genius whose mind could solve problems that no one else could even comprehend, yet who struggled to navigate the ordinary world around him. At Bletchley Park, he was a leader, a mentor, and the spark behind machines that decoded Hitler's most secret messages. Yet outside those walls, he remained socially isolated, often misunderstood, and painfully aware of how different he was from those around him. He walked the line between obsession and inspiration, sometimes losing track of time, of meals, of the outside world, as he focused entirely on the work that would save countless lives. Colleagues admired him for his clarity of thought, his ability to see patterns in chaos, and his unwavering focus. Yet they also recognized a certain loneliness, a detachment from the human emotions that bound the rest of them together. In quiet moments, Turing would retreat to his small office, papers scattered with equations and diagrams, thinking through problems in ways that seemed abstract yet always had real consequences. Outside Bletchley, bombs fell over London, ration lines grew longer, and soldiers died on distant battlefields. But Turing was lost in a different war, a battle against complexity, probability, and logic itself. He was driven by a belief that the mind, guided by reason and ingenuity, could outsmart even the most formidable machines of men. Yet, as history would later reveal, brilliance came with a cost. His extraordinary talents could not shield him from the world's intolerance, and his differences made him vulnerable to society's harsh judgments. During the war, Turing's contributions remained secret, and even as he saved lives on an unimaginable scale, he received little recognition, no public accolades, and no understanding of the moral weight he carried. And still, he continued, driven by a singular purpose: to outthink the unthinkable, to break codes, and to protect a nation that could not yet know how much it owed him. In Turing, we see the essence of genius entwined with humanity, someone capable of shaping the course of history while remaining profoundly alone, a man whose mind was a weapon more powerful than any gun, tank, or plane, and whose quiet perseverance behind the scenes would leave an indelible mark on both war and the future of technology. After the war, Alan Turing returned to a world that owed him everything, yet understood nothing of his contributions. The Allies had won, the U-boats were sunk, D-Day had succeeded, and millions of lives had been saved thanks in no small part to the work of Bletchley Park and its codebreakers. And yet, for Turing, there was no recognition, no medals, no public glory. Instead, the man who had outwitted Hitler's most complex machine became a target of his own country's intolerance. In 1952, Turing was prosecuted for his homosexuality, then considered a criminal offense in Britain. The brilliant mathematician, whose mind had safeguarded nations, was forced to endure chemical castration, humiliation, and isolation. The irony was bitter. He had spent years operating in total secrecy to save lives, and now he was punished by the very society he had protected. Friends and colleagues watched helplessly as Turing's spirit was broken, his personal life destroyed, and his dignity stripped away, all while the full impact of his genius remained hidden from public view. For decades, the story of his achievements remained classified, a secret buried under layers of wartime confidentiality. While generals and politicians claimed credit for victories, Turing's name was absent from history books, his face absent from photographs commemorating triumph. And yet, even in despair, he continued to think, to calculate, to imagine what the future could hold. He pondered computing, artificial intelligence, and the limits of logic, planting seeds for the technological revolutions that would follow long after his death. In the shadows of society's betrayal, Turing's life became a testament to both the heights of human ingenuity and the depths of human injustice. He had saved millions, changed the course of history, and yet he was treated as a criminal, his contributions unknown to the world he had protected. This tragic contradiction would haunt his story for decades, leaving a legacy that was both inspiring and heartbreaking. A man whose mind could decode the secrets of an entire empire, yet whose personal freedom was denied by the very nation he had served. Decades after the war, the full significance of Alan Turing's work began to emerge, not as a tale of battles and soldiers, but as a revolution in thought, technology, and the very way humanity interacts with machines. The Bombe and the intelligence it produced had not only turned the tide of World War II, saving countless lives, but had also laid the foundation for the digital age. Computers, artificial intelligence, and modern cryptography all trace their roots back to Turing's genius. Today, we live in a world where machines can learn, analyze, and make decisions at speeds no human mind could match. And it all began with a quiet mathematician in a secluded British estate, tirelessly searching for patterns in a seemingly unbreakable code. Turing's story is not merely one of technical brilliance, but of human courage, perseverance, and vision. He worked in secrecy, knowing that his contributions would remain hidden, that recognition might never come. Yet he pursued his mission relentlessly because he understood the stakes, the lives that depended on his intellect, the freedom of nations hanging by the thread of his calculations. His personal life, tragically marred by societal injustice, reminds us that genius is not always rewarded in its own time, and that the cost of innovation is often paid in silence and suffering. Yet the impact of his work transcends the individual, echoing through history in the devices we use, the strategies we employ, and the knowledge that even the most complex challenges can be solved with insights, logic, and perseverance. In classrooms, laboratories, and research centers around the world, Turing's principles continue to inspire mathematicians, engineers, and scientists, demonstrating that the mind can be a weapon more powerful than any arsenal of war. The story of how one mathematician broke Hitler's secret messages is more than a story of code breaking. It is a story of intellect triumphing over oppression, of hidden victories shaping the course of history, and of a legacy that continues to influence the world today. Alan Turing's life and work remind us that the most powerful battles are sometimes fought not on fields of blood, but in the quiet halls of thought, where human ingenuity meets the impossible and where the consequences ripple across generations, shaping the future in ways the world may never fully comprehend.